Thank you for joining us again for this session. Today we have with us Mr. Neil Kashkari. I have some knowledge about him, though I am new to the US, from his work in alternative energy, from his work in debt restructuring for the stressed credit assets back when he was in Treasury. But I will not dare to introduce him given his illustrious background. I would request him to introduce himself for the population here so that we can hear more about his insights.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'd like to make this very interactive, and I always ask audiences, please ask me, show me respect by, when we get to Q&A, asking me your toughest question. I would appreciate that. But let me just tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm the Republican nominee for governor of California. We have an election coming up in 2.5 weeks. But let me back up. I was born in Ohio. My parents came here from India about 50 years ago. My dad was an associate professor of electrical engineering at the University of Akron. My mom was a pathologist at the local community hospital, Akron City Hospital, where I was born. I studied, obviously born and raised here, studied here. Like so many Indians, my parents insisted on one thing, which was that I get a good education. Because I got a good education, every door of this country has been open to me. All right, you live here. All right, this is the greatest country in the world. If you get a good education in America, nothing can stop you. It doesn't matter where you're from, it doesn't matter who your parents are, all that matters is what you know. And so that opportunity was afforded to me because my parents came here because they saw that I get a good education. So I studied engineering. I did my bachelor's and master's in mechanical engineering at the University of Illinois in Urbana. And then I came to Los Angeles after graduating to become an aerospace engineer at TRW in Redondo Beach. It's now Northrop Grumman, and I worked on NASA missions, satellites and whatnot, and I loved it. And the path before me was to go get my PhD, but I said, you know, I'm not sure that I want to get my PhD, so let me learn about business. And I went to Wharton to get my MBA at the University of Pennsylvania. And I remember that because my father was very nervous because I gave up a very good job as an engineer, and I took out $100,000 of loans to go to business school. And my father was questioning my judgment, understandably so. So I went to Wharton to get my MBA, got my MBA, and that introduced me to business and finance. And upon graduation, I joined Goldman Sachs in Silicon Valley, and I worked as a banker helping startup tech companies raise money so they could expand and they could grow. But then in 2006, you know, I'd always had an interest in government since I was a kid. And in 2006, President Bush picked the CEO of my firm, Henry Paulson, to become Treasury Secretary. I didn't know him. I'd met him once for 10 minutes. But I picked up the phone and I called him up and I said, I want to come with you to Treasury. I don't care if you want me to lick envelopes. I just want to come and serve. And I want to learn about government and see if I can contribute. Now, I'm going to tell you something. My dad thought I was a little crazy when I left engineering to go to business school. All of my colleagues at Goldman thought I was certifiable. When I still had my student loans to pay off, had a mortgage to pay, and I gave up, I was still a young junior guy, 4 years at Goldman, gave up my career to go serve in Washington. And I looked at them and I said, you're the one who's crazy, not me, because this is a once-in-a-lifetime chance to give back and to learn how government works. And I went to Washington. By the grace of God, he said yes, and I went with him. And I worked harder than I had ever worked in my life. By far, not even close. People like to say bankers work long hours. Nothing compared to what we had to do in Washington. Now, I went there before the financial crisis hit, not expecting it to be a very interesting time. And then the financial crisis hit, a year later, 2007, 2008, 2009, and I became Assistant Secretary of the Treasury. So I was promoted, and I was confirmed by the US Senate, unanimously confirmed. And I was one of the key people trying to stabilize the American economy when the terrible crisis happened. So I'm the guy who's famous or infamous, depending how you look at it, who ran the TARP, the $700 billion program to stabilize the financial sector. And it was a terrible experience for our country, the worst economic crisis in 80 years, 90 years, since the Great Depression. But something amazing happened. At that time of crisis, we got Republicans and Democrats to work together. So we got George Bush and Barack Obama to work together. We got Nancy Pelosi and John Boehner. I was appointed by President Bush, and President Obama asked me to stay. because we were still in the middle of the crisis and had to stabilize the economy. And we deployed, it was a $700 billion program on paper. We ended up deploying about $450 billion in about 7 months. And we stabilized the economy, and I'm proud to tell you we got every single dollar back. And we even made, as last count, a $15 billion profit for the taxpayers. And so a time of national crisis, we got Republicans and Democrats to work together, and we did the right thing for the American people. And you know what got us through it? All right, people say, you know, running for governor is tough because you have a lot of criticism. Nothing like the financial crisis. So you can go back and look. You may remember I would go and testify before the House and the Senate, and it'd be 40 angry members of Congress, Republican and Democrat, shouting at me, saying, "What the heck are you doing? We're really upset about this." And then we just explained what we were doing, and then we went back to work, because we knew we had to get this done, and we had to act on behalf of the American people and the global economy. And so one of the lessons I took from that, and it started at the top, President Bush and President Obama, Treasury Secretary Paulson, Ben Bernanke, the Fed chair, we did what we believed was the right thing to do. Popularity, irrelevant. Do what's right. And then, you know, with some help, hopefully it'll all work out, and it did. So I was there for 3 years, came back to California, came back to the private sector. I joined PIMCO, the investment firm in Newport Beach. And then in January 2013, I did one of those things again. I said, I'm going to do something different. And I said, I'm going to consider running for governor of California. Now here's why. I look at my life and the opportunities that I've had. My parents weren't wealthy, we weren't poor either, but I got a good education, and that's the great equalizer in America. And in California today, our schools are ranked 46th out of 50 states in terms of academic achievement. 46th. So there's 6 million public school students in California. Literally, millions of kids in California do not have the same shot that I had, or that you had, as I know where you went to school, okay? In the terms of the job market, we're ranked 44th out of 50 states. We're competing with the worst states in America in terms of economic opportunity. And you put those two things together, failing schools and a lack of jobs, California, once you adjust for our cost of living, we're #1 in America for poverty. Now, poverty in America is different than poverty in India. You know that, okay? But nonetheless, how can California, how can it be the 1 in 4, 24% of Californians meet this threshold of poverty in America, by the American definition, highest in America? We have a high cost of living, and we have a poor job market. And you put those things together, that's how we're #1 in poverty. And our current governor looks at the same statistics. These aren't, by the way, these aren't my measurements. These are federal government measurements of education performance and jobs and income. Our current governor looks at these measurements and has declared California comeback. Talk about being utterly out of touch with the struggles of families across California. And so I looked at this and I said, well, someone has to lead the fight. Hang on for a second, I'll come back to you. Someone has to lead the fight to turn this around, to bring jobs back to California and to fix the schools. But I'm also on 2 missions. Mission #1 is to fix the state. Mission #2 is I'm trying to rebuild the Republican Party, but around a positive, inclusive message, a message of economic opportunity. So I'm spending a lot of my time as a candidate going into diverse communities across California. Asian communities, Latino communities, African American communities, Caucasian, well-to-do, middle-class, low-income, with the exact same message. I want your kids to get a good education. I want you to get a good job. And if we do those 2 things, most of the other problems in our state almost take care of themselves. Less crime, less drugs, stronger communities. Most of the problems are rooted in this lack of real opportunity. And I'm really excited about the progress that we're making. So in our system here, we have a primary, right? We had the primary in June, and it was a hotly contested primary. And I did something, I said to myself, if I'm gonna do this, I'm not gonna compromise what I believe 1 ounce. So you know what? I'm the Republican nominee for governor of California. And I am young, I am the son of immigrants, I am brown, I am pro-choice. I think marriage is between 2 people and God. whoever wants to get married is between the two of them and God. It's got nothing to do with me, and I'm Hindu. There is no Republican candidate for dog catcher that has all of these different criteria, okay? But I didn't compromise 1 ounce. I didn't pretend to be something I'm not. I didn't wrap myself in a pretzel the way candidates so often do in primaries. Republicans tend to veer to the right in the primary, Democrats tend to veer to the left, and then they have to try to come back to the middle of the general. I didn't play that game. I said, no, I'm focused on jobs and education. And I believe I can unite not only Republicans, but independents and Democrats too. Because you know what? Democrats love their kids as much as Republicans do. I think Democrats want to bring jobs back to California too. Right. So why don't we focus on these issues that unite us and show how we actually do this? So I'm really proud of the progress that we've made. And we're now 2.5, 3 weeks out from the election, and it's still a tall mountain to climb, but we're making great progress, and I can talk to you in Q&A about how we're going to close this gap. But let me just share with you a few minutes about some of my ideas, and then we'll turn it over to you, to questions. Let's just talk about the economy for a second. There is so much that we can do to bring jobs back to California and to make California more competitive economically. We're ranked 50th out of 50 states for business climate. 4 years in a row, California has been ranked 50th out of 50 states. So you, as business leaders, when you decide you want to make an investment somewhere, if we're asking you to come to California, we're asking you to start out in last place. So you all saw the Tesla announcement that the battery factory is going to Nevada. I don't blame Elon Musk. Right? We're asking him to come here and start out in last place. Who wants to start a business in last place? Don't you at least want to start even? Maybe start out ahead, at least even. So the reasons where we are, our regulatory system has gone out of control with more and more overlapping regulations that is stifling innovation. So we've got these great companies like Uber and Lyft, and what's the first reflex of the politicians in Sacramento? Let's get our hands on that. Let's control it. Let's stifle it, because they're scared about the unknown. Instead of encouraging and promoting innovation, drives jobs away. And when we design great products here, right, you all have